All right. Hello, Peaceful Profits Nation. Zach here with an exciting client spotlight episode for you today. Today, we are actually talking to our client, Kelle Sparta. She is a spirit doctor. She is a transformational shaman who specializes in working with high performance people who are interested in mastering their inner world in the same way they've mastered their outer world. So, the way she puts this is quickly, efficiently, and like the badass they are. So she helps overachievers get through their healing and growth processes in a tenth the time it takes others just by cutting out the guesswork and giving you the stuff that works. And so, Kelle, welcome to the show. Thank you for being with us. How are you doing today?
Great, Zach. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I thought we'd kick it off with this. I mean, I know you've been a client of Peaceful Profits for a couple of months here, but I would love to start hearing a little bit more about where you're currently at. I mean, how would you describe your greatest recent success?
So I would say that the greatest recent success is just getting the book done and the launch going. I haven't dialed in the ads yet, but that has been the biggest thing because it was a huge process, right? So I got the book. I was stunned at the process that you guys taught in the system was so effective. I got the book done in like 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks.
2 weeks, really?
Yeah. And
Yeah, can you
yeah,
walk us through that process? I mean, from start to finish, what was it like kind of utilizing some of the resources to actually getting a full book completed in such a short period of time? What was that like?
well, I had like, I don't know, 6 or 7 pages written of stuff that I had used in the past. And I had these, so my book is about how to map out your path to healing, right? It's the
Mhm.
overachiever's guide to nailing your spiritual growth in record time, right?
Sure.
And so one of the chapters, the longest chapter, is actually filled with blocks that I had already mapped out years ago. And so, basically what I was doing with with the book was taking stuff I've been talking about for years
Hmm.
and just putting it into a structured format, right? And so, from a creation perspective, it didn't take a lot of effort in that regard, except that, I would go back in and say, oh, well, I should probably talk about this and I should probably talk about that. But it was taking stuff that I'd already been talking about and just putting it together into a format that made sense. And so I think that's why it was able to be done that quickly. But
Right.
I hadn't written it all out before ever. It had been in audio recordings and this, that, and the other thing. And so I literally was using the Otter transcription service to do that a lot, and
Okay.
it was super super easy.
Well, that's great to hear that the process was smooth. And when I first saw that you had composed your book in such a short period of time, I was amazed. But then again, that's kind of the process that we teach as a way of being able to dictate it properly and get it from a point where it's just a thought to a full realization in a short period of time. You did indicate a couple of things like you had worked out some of these blockages and processes in the past. And so was your experience with writing the book, was it one where you were mostly just curating material that you already had, or did you find yourself having to kind of dig deep a little bit to extract information and processes that you hadn't thought about before?
I would say it's a little bit of both. It's mostly the curation because the book
Mhm.
itself is an early stage process, and I do a lot of later stage work. And so the early stage stuff I've really been working on for like 20 years. So, there was some stuff that came out of it as part of the process, but like the spiritual traps that I started
Sure.
to codify and things like that I'd never actually written down in that way before. Um, but most of it was a curation process for me.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably one of the perks of being a expert or guru in your area for quite some time is you have a lot of experiences and processes to draw from. You're not really in research mode more so, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. And prior to composing this book, had you written a book in the past, or was this your first go at a full-fledged
I
short book?
had actually. I have a book published in the real estate industry back in 2006.
Oh, okay.
And I did that the old fashioned way and I typed it all out and I wrote that book in a month and a half because I procrastinated forever on my book deal and had to get it in by the deadline. And so I ended up with tendonitis and could barely move my hands by the time I was done. And it was a physically painful process, in addition to being an arduous process for the creation, because it took a month and a half of just typing 20 pages a day. And so it was a lot. And so to say that I was a bit resistant to wanting to do another book is my clients have been asking me for a book for years, and I've just been like, no, I don't have time. And so when you guys said, oh, you can record it, I'm like, maybe I could write another book.
Yeah. I've always liked that about, how much people have resonated with orating a book and dictating a book as opposed to sitting down and writing it. And I believe you resonate with this as well. There's a portion in Mike's training where he talks about when you're writing while you are like typing it out while you're writing the book, you are by default self-editing. And an interesting thought I had recently was, I don't know if you resonate with this at all, is this idea that the oldest form of human communication is speaking, even before writing. And so by default, back in the day, you had people dictating and then a scribe or an amanuensis or whatnot writing it out. Music was always written that way. Stories were told down that way. And so it's really funny how you would think that with the tools that we have today, that typing it would be easy and whatnot. However, a primitive thing like speaking it and recording it and just making sure that it's raw has actually proven to be effective. So I always thought that was pretty interesting, that it's basically just going back to the old way people used to write, which was, okay, here's a scroll. I'm just going to talk for an hour and then I'm going to have you write it all down. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but.
No, I totally agree. I did do an outline. So that helped, but in regards to, I've been a public speaker for years and I've had my own podcast for years. So I'm used to talking. So that helped a lot for the editing process. I didn't have a lot of randomness to edit out. But yeah, it was so much easier. It was so much easier.
Oh good. God. Yeah. Well, easy is always good. And I'm glad to hear that was the experience, with this recent success of just penning the book in that period of time. How did that win impact your business? I know you indicated that your clients have been wanting a book from you for so long now. And so what kind of changes have been made as a result of you now having the book?
Well, so not a lot yet. You've got to remember, we launched the funnel like 3 weeks ago. And we've been testing it. And there was like a week in there where we had it turned off, trying to figure out how to, change things around and whatever. So, but I will say this, there has been, so for the last 3 years, I have been restructuring my company to be a multi-million-dollar business. So I've done that by changing platforms and upgrading technology. And in the last 2 months or 3 months since I signed up with the course, I have just upgraded everything. So I've paid to go to Teams on Calendly and to go to Teams on Zoom and to be able to integrate all of the people that I've been sort of cobbling things together with, my coaches who work for me, and we've been sort of doing things on the cheap. And I've just finally started to treat my business like the big business that I'm intending for it to become. And we're getting the automations in place because I'm like, the moment we get this marketing dialed in, things are just going to explode. And so I need to be prepared for that. And so we're going through and optimizing all of our systems. And so it's had a huge impact. Writing the book and stepping into the coaching program has had a huge impact on the seriousness with which I view my business. Instead of going, oh, well, I'm just, it'll be fine for now. It'll be fine for now. I'm going, no, nothing is fine now. It has to be prepared for the onslaught of business. And I actually manifested a salesperson from my podcast. She wrote into me last week and said, I adore your podcast and I want, are you hiring? And I said, well, I don't know.
That's
I said, I
excellent.
don't know,
Yeah.
maybe, what do you do? and,
Right.
and she's like, well, I used to run this highly successful business and now I'm just looking to change what I do and how I do it. And I was like, you're perfect. Yes, please come. And we're now working together. She's going to be my director of sales and my
Wonderful.
outreach person. And so, and she's working on commission initially until we can get things going. And so I'm just like, yay.
That's
It's like,
amazing.
but you take your business seriously. You treat it like it's going to be big, and then you attract people who are the right people for it. I didn't even tell anybody I was looking for a salesperson.
That's amazing to hear. And somebody who had been listening to you for quite some time now resonated with that and reached out to you, all through not just a result of your efforts, but also you taking your business more seriously. And I wanted to ask you about that. It was almost like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it sounded like the book was not just a marketing asset at the end of the day, but it was a way of viewing your business and almost expanding the scope of what
Yeah.
your business was like. Like it's like, now I have a book, now it's legitimate, now I have something that I can use to really scale this up. So
I don't
it's
know
time to
that
kind of
it's
get the ducks in the row.
I don't know that it's the book that made it feel like it was legitimate so much as it was the book and the funnel and the pathway to getting lots of business in the door. Because,
Oh, okay.
I've written a book before and I'm like, okay, it's a book. The book that I wrote before did open some doors for me, but it's the combination of the book and the funnel and the coaching program is so amazing because it's comprehensive in not just in how do I do X, Y, and Z, but in the mindset pieces that are so
Right.
important, right? And I can't even tell you how many coaching programs I've done in my career. I'm 25 years in business. I've done pretty much everything.
Hmm.
And I've never walked into a coaching program where I was so solid on the fact that it was going to work. And I walked in knowing it was going to work instead of hoping it was going to work. Just the energy was
Hmm.
there. It was all lined up. I knew it was going to work. I still to this day have no doubt that it's going to work, even though my ads are not dialed in yet, even though the creative hasn't been dialed in yet, even though we're still
Right.
in that sort of trying to figure it out phase. I know it's going to work. And
Mm.
there's something about the energetics of the program that are so dialed in and so solid that I have no doubt about it. And that's unprecedented for me. I've never had that before in 25 years.
Wow. Well, I'm very glad to hear that, and that it's addressed some of the needs or bottlenecks or constraints that you may have been running into. Let's talk a little bit more about that. When you talk about comprehensiveness and because you have a clear blueprint now for
Yeah.
success for that's very outcomes oriented that Mike has reverse engineered. What were some of those moments while you were going through the program that were moments that gave you more certainty versus experience that you had had in the past?
So I have to say it's all the things about the mindset because he does that whole the pit of despair, I think he called it,
Right.
whatever those pieces. And I'm like, oh my God, yes, I've been there. Right. And the mindset stuff about here's what it's like to run a multi-million-dollar business, because it's somebody who's talking from where I want to go.
Hmm.
He's talking from already there for where I'm choosing to go next, right? And there's just this open insight into what it looks like to do that, and there's this transparency that I so appreciate, and this sense
Hmm.
of not feeling abandoned whenever the process is complete or whatever. It's like, no, you're always there. You've always got me. It's all good, right? So the other programs, I feel like it's like, we're going to give you the minimum amount we need to give you and to make you satisfied. But, ultimately we're just going to try and milk you for more money, and I don't feel that way here. It feels more like we're invested in your outcome, you know?
Good, good. Yeah, yeah. I can resonate with that. I second that as well. I can't tell you about how many times where the information was good in the sense, but I think having the how, the what, and the why has been really crucial. And you
Yeah.
kind of need all three. More so the why, because then you can ask yourself those questions that tailor it specifically to your circumstance, as opposed to it being a one size fits all. And so I definitely, yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And the
Yeah.
emotional cycle of change is very, very true. I think seldom, if ever, do a lot of programs address that, where you're going to have a dip. You're going to be so
Yeah.
motivated when you come in, and you're going to hit a point where you recognize what you're actually up against, and it kind of almost shows you what you're made of. But if you can push through,
Really?
you have feedback.
Yes. I can't even
Yeah.
tell you. Oh my God. So I just have to share this. I had a copywriter that was working with me, and we were on trade. I was doing coaching for her. She was copywriting for me. And I always told her, I said, if you ever feel out of balance, let me know. Well, she was supposed to be doing my sales page, and she was supposed to have it for me in a week and didn't. And then I was like, where's my sales page? Oh, I'll have it for you in a week, and didn't. And came back and said, I'm feeling out of balance. And I'm like, that was a conversation for 2 weeks ago. She's like, I need to be paid. I said, oh no. I said, I'm not going to pay you because you've spent 2 weeks. You've wasted 2 weeks of my time when I was on a short deadline to launch,
Yeah.
and I'm not paying you for that kind of performance. That's not happening. So I took over and did my own copywriting. So I ended up having to do all the copywriting. I wrote my sales page. I wrote all of the ads. I did all of my own copywriting, and that was not time I had planned to have. And I had one thing after another just break down. And even after I launched, I was like, okay, we're done. Yay. Okay, I can move on to the next thing. No, I can, we started getting notifications because I warm launched to my group first, to my audience. And I told them I was warm launching to them. I was like, look, you guys are the first people to see this. If it's broke, if it's broken, we tried our best. If it's broken, please let me know and I'll fix it. And they did, because it was. And so I had so many things that were broken. And I'm like, oh my God, I tried so hard. And then you just have to go back through and fix it all. And it's so easy to get demoralized when you're like, oh, finally I finished it, because I was just exhausted by the time I got through everything, because every time I would need something from somebody, they would be like, oh, I can't do that. And I'm like, what? Crap. And I'd have to do it myself. Right. So by the time I launched it, I was ready to be done. And then everything broke and there was not done. So even now, we're still having to do ads and change copy. And, I don't think there's a done. I'm starting to recognize that I don't think there's a done. I think this is an ongoing process. And I have to be honest, I haven't listened to or watched all of the videos. So I'm not sure. I'm sure Mike addresses this. I just haven't gotten to it yet. But I'm still working my way through the videos. And I'm just like, I just needed to be launched and needed to be moving. So
well, you gotta get to the outcome, and Mike is an advocate of just imperfect action, in that we don't really
trust me.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be all
imperfect.
good. Right, but momentum is better than all this information with no implementation. And so the fact that you're taking those steps towards a launch with getting your ads dialed in, or I know you did a soft launch, but when you actually turn everything on and get
it's
everything
on
dialed in,
we're testing.
Right.
We've been testing for about 2.5, 3 weeks now. So
yeah,
a week, like 4 days off, but yeah.
And that's all the step in the right direction. We don't really know. To what you said, I don't believe you're going to necessarily be done in the traditional sense of, mission accomplished. However, I think what happens is you just start to become a little bit more efficient in certain areas, and then you start to kind of balance everything, so that what was so unpredictable in the past, which was okay, if I fix this, another fire would come up, all of a sudden you're a little bit more preemptive. And I think the difference between a 7 or an 8 figure business owner and somebody who's just starting out is that ability to be able to create predictability out of things that you couldn't predict in the past. And now you're more preemptive, because if you already
Yeah.
knew about it, you would already have fixed it. And
Right.
after talking to so many different business owners, that seems to be the common thread. And yet they'll all say, well, it's not quite done. The
Right.
machine's not fully well oiled where it can, it essentially, doesn't require any more improvements. So
Yeah.
yeah, I
I
think
will
the book
say
is great.
this, my soft launch has paid for all of my ad spend so far.
Well, there you go.
So that
Yeah.
was useful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, Excellent. You were selling your front end products for the soft launch, and essentially, kind of what Mike talked about.
Yeah.
It was able to basically cover the ad spend entirely.
Yes. Yeah. It has, I made about $1,100 on the front on the soft launch.
Mhm.
And I've spent about $700 to date on the testing. So I'm still in the green on that one, in the black, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's excellent to hear, and I appreciate you, Kelly, for giving us a breakdown as to some of the successes that you had, some of the learning lessons that have also come as a result through working in this program. Now we're at my favorite part of our client spotlight episodes. You're currently a client of ours, and you've mentioned you're here working on getting your book dialed in, making sure that when you do launch and you turn everything on, that you have all the systems in place to be able to scale predictably. Can you tell our audience what's the number one piece of advice you'd like to share to others who are currently working through that process as well?
So I have two pieces. One is do it. Don't think about it, just do it. Right. Done and imperfect is better than not done ever. And
Mm.
the second piece is it's going to be harder than you think. And that's okay. You just don't let anything stop you. I look at all of the work that happened, all of the things that went wrong, all of the oh craps moments, and while I was in them, I recognized them for what they were, which is their birthing pains. Right? It's like a mother
Yeah.
who's in the middle of giving birth and she's in pain, she's screaming and she's like, okay, I'm done now. It's like, no, 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 the baby is coming. Just
Right.
keep going. You don't get to, when going through hell, don't stop. That's a
Mhm.
Winston Churchill quote. It's that thing. It's don't let the breakdowns stop you, because they're the things that if you see them as obstacles, see, I see this all the time with entrepreneurs because I've done a lot of business coaching over the years.
Mhm.
I see all the time that they'll hit a roadblock and they'll take it as a sign from the universe that they're going in the wrong direction. And instead of just doubling down and buckling in and moving through, they will pivot. And every time you
Mhm.
pivot, you start over. And you're never going to get
Hmm.
anywhere if you keep doing what I call the panic pivot, right? It's like you can't get anywhere if you keep pivoting. You have to at some point just buckle down, double down, just do it and move through it and just get stubborn until you're done, you know?
Oh, absolutely. I like that. The panic pivot. I
Yeah.
can't tell you how many times it's happened to me too,
Yeah.
where you
Me
hit
too.
that
That's why I
first
figured it
wall.
out.
Yeah, and you're like, wait a minute, maybe this isn't for me. But in reality, it's your first wall. It is
Right.
just your first wall in a series of bigger and more difficult walls to scale on this journey. And if you can overcome the first one, then you're going to be given the grit. I think that's the
Right.
right word, to be able to scale the other walls. And so I think that's so great that you say that, and appreciative, because a lot of people who are coming into this and wanting to scale their businesses, especially once they've gotten the first few clients, or they have a high ticket offer, whatever it is they're offering, there truly is going to be a wall to scale. And um, even when it comes to things like having to repackage the offer or dive into territory that they hadn't dove in before. I don't know if that's the word, dove in. That's not all right. My English is weird. That they haven't gone into. There's that tendency to want to start over because it feels good, and you get optimistic about your entrepreneurial journey when you do pivot, because then you're like,
Right.
well, now it's new, but then you hit that same cycle where you hit a dip, and then
Right.
you got to ask yourself, are you going to push through, or are you going to fold and quit? Right.
Yeah.
So that's excellent advice, and much appreciated. Here's a random question that's kind of off of that as well. When is it time to quit? And not saying quit, but when is it time to kind of make adjustments where you need to, where you do have to take a step back and kind of cut your losses? What does that look like for you?
For me, it's when I'm out of alignment with the work that I'm doing. And so, for instance, the book that I wrote before in 2006 was in the real estate industry. Mm-hmm. And I was a real estate trainer. And, I was up there. I was a writer for Realtor Magazine. I was speaking at the national conventions. I mean, I was up there. And I got to the point where I was like, I just don't care about real estate anymore. I just don't care. Right. And at some point you have to look at that and say, well, if I don't care, I need to get out. What is my passion? What do I care about? Right. When I was out of alignment with the work that I was doing, that's when it was time for me to quit.
Out of alignment. Okay. Yeah. So in other words, it's not about difficulty. That's not a reason to quit.
No, difficulty is never a reason to quit.
Right.
If that were the case, I would not be doing this work, because I've been trying to get this path to work for about 20 years. Okay. Sure. So if that were the case, I would be long out of this. Yeah.
Great. So, okay, if it falls out of harmony with you, that's a good reason, because that's your why, which is pretty basic, yet, it's the most important thing. Right. And then you mentioned when things get a little bit difficult, that's really kind of shows you what you're made of when you push through those walls and make that work.
Yeah. Okay, now that's not to say that you don't reevaluate from time to time, right? There's, if you're running up against the same wall over and over again and getting nowhere, well, then either there's something in you that needs to be adjusted, or there's something in the path that you've chosen that needs to get adjusted. And if you've done the work that Mike suggests with looking at the market and seeing if there's sufficient market and so on and so forth, then it's most likely it's you. So one of the things that I've had to address personally is I've had to look over the years, probably 10 years ago, I was deep in my codependence with my clients. I was like, I can't charge more because they can't afford it. That was a big one for me, right? Sure. And feeling like I couldn't abandon people who couldn't afford me. And how do I do that? And I have to take my friends in my business with me. I have to bring my friends who want to be business people too, but suck at it. I have to bring them with me, right? All of these pieces that were me just being codependent with other people. I had to get to the point where I was like, look, I am not everybody's mother. It is not my job to make sure everyone is successful or everyone has access to everything. It is my job to be a business owner and to provide services to people who can afford them and who will purchase them and appreciate them. And it is my job to hire people who are competent, not my friends. Right. I had to make that transition. I had to let go of the codependency piece and stop trying to save people and at the expense of myself. Right. Yeah. And so sometimes it's not the outside world that's the problem. Sometimes it's the inside world that's the problem.
I think that's most of the time. Now that I think about it, as you were saying that, it's kind of made me think a little bit on instances where it was entirely an internal decision that had external consequences and parameters. And I think so much of that is so true with business, and that how people's businesses run is really just a outward representation of how they make decisions internally and what kind of person. I mean, you can actually feel the energy of the entrepreneur in products that you purchase and in marketing and just how you're contacted, which should really just be an extension of them, a little bit of an over romanticized idea, but I think there is a lot of truth to that it is you, for 9 times out of 10, if there is a business problem or business success, it probably can be traced to you. You are the root of all of that. So yeah, wonderful. Well, that's great advice. I think that's wonderful. Now, to wrap this up, this episode up here, Kelle, how can our listeners find out more about you and what you're up to?
Well, my website is kellesparta.com, spelled like it looks like on the screen there, Kelle. Sparta, like the Greek city state. And if you want to check out my podcast, it's spiritsherpapodcast.com or Spirit Sherpa on any podcast player. The work that I do in the world is about helping people to find their happiness. And so we also work with business owners to talk about the things that I just mentioned. So those things are part of our repertoire as well. So if you are finding that you are not actually managing to get things done in your program and you can't figure out why, give me a call. I'm here.
Excellent. Well, that's Kelle for you guys. She's going to be there to help you overcome, any types of blockages or obstacles that you may be running into internally. What about your book? Is that something that listeners can readily just go and find and pick up, or
how it's on the website?
Okay.
So if you go to the website, it's right there at the top. It's called The Overachiever's Guide to Nailing Your Spiritual Growth in Record Time. And it helps you to identify the roadmap to happiness.
Wonderful. Well, you heard it here first, folks. All right. Pick up Kelle Sparta's book on her website. Be sure to check out her podcast as well. And like indicated earlier, she specializes, in working with people who really want to master their inner world. So you don't have to go through this long, hard, turbulent journey on your own. That's why you have folks like Kelle that you can reach out to if you are encountering some internal roadblocks. And I just want to give you another thank you, Kelle. Thank you for being with us here. Thank you for the interview. And I'm sure that our audience really got a lot out of your wisdom and the experience that you've had with working with Peaceful Profits. So I thank you for your time.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks. I'm so grateful to Mike. I can't even tell you. So
All right. Well, that's it for this episode, folks. We appreciate you tuning in, and we will see you next time.